K9 German Shepherd buried for days. Firefighters dug her out and were shocked by what they saw. She was trained to serve, trained to protect. A decorated K9 German Shepherd who had once been the pride of her unit. Until the unthinkable happened. A landslide buried the entire rescue site she was working on, along with her. Days passed. Rescue teams gave up. The world moved on. But then, in the most unexpected corner of a collapsed building, a firefighter's shovel hit something solid. What they uncovered left everyone speechless. Because not only was she still there, she was alive. And what she was guarding would make the entire team drop to their knees. This isn't just a story about survival. It's about instinct, loyalty, and the kind of courage only a K9 can show when the world has already said goodbye. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that could change how you see the world and the heroes who walk it on four legs. It had been raining for 5 straight days. In the foothills outside of Flagstaff, Arizona, mud had become something heavier, something dangerous. The soil, oversaturated and unstable, was sliding inch by inch down into the canyons below. Roads cracked, trees toppled, and then, late in the afternoon of the 6th day, an entire section of the canyon face gave way. The landslide swallowed everything in its path, cabins, power lines, and the entire east wing of an old emergency rescue facility. No one knew how many people had been inside. Within the hour, fire crews and search and rescue teams from across the county flooded in. Generators hummed. Floodlights cut through the fog. Helicopters hovered above, dropping sonar and scanners. The area was marked red: high danger, low visibility, unstable terrain. Among the first responders was Captain Eli Thompson, a seasoned firefighter with 20 years on the job and one constant partner. Kaida, a 6-year-old sable-coated German Shepherd, certified for urban search and rescue. She was lean, powerful, and eerily intelligent. Kaida had been trained since she was a puppy to locate survivors under rubble, to crawl into places no human could reach, and to alert her handler with a single bark when she found someone, alive or dead. On the morning of the landslide, she was restless. Eli had opened her cage in the back of the truck, and she leapt out like a rocket, ears forward, tail low, nose twitching at every movement of the wind. "Easy," he whispered, clipping the harness around her chest. "We're going slow today." But Kaida didn't want slow. They were assigned to the outer ridge, near the partially buried wing of the rescue building. It was mostly rubble, concrete beams, steel rebar, smashed office chairs. No signs of life. No heat signatures. Until Kaida froze. She didn't bark. She lowered herself, body tense, eyes locked on a pile of debris to the east. Eli followed her line of sight, frowning. "What is it, girl?" She sniffed once, twice, then moved, carefully, deliberately, over shards of concrete, through a narrow gap beneath a collapsed wall. And then she disappeared. "Kaida!" Eli called. No answer. He dropped to his knees, crawling after her. But the gap was too narrow for a grown man. He could barely see her tail before it vanished behind the wreckage. And then silence. Eli's gut clenched. "Kaida!" Still nothing. He radioed immediately. "This is Unit 14. K9 is unresponsive. Possible entrapment near the east perimeter. Requesting backup and K9 support." The reply came fast. "Copy that, Unit 14. Evac coming your way. Hold position." But he didn't hold. He couldn't. Kaida had saved over 30 lives during her career. She had pulled a toddler out of a collapsed trailer in Santa Fe, found a missing hiker in the Colorado backcountry, tracked a buried construction worker under 15 feet of wreckage, and now she was buried. Crews arrived within minutes. They began clearing the pile where she had entered, slowly and carefully, fearing another collapse. Eli refused to leave. He stayed at the edge of the opening, calling her name every 5 minutes. But hours passed, then days, and still no bark, no movement, no signal. Some of the younger firefighters stopped asking. "She's gone," someone whispered. "There's no way she survived that long." But Eli didn't give up. On the fourth day, he set up camp beside the rubble, refusing orders to rotate out. If she's alive, he told them, she's waiting. And I'm not walking away. By the fifth day, even the chief had grown silent. And on the sixth, a miracle. It happened just after sunrise. A new team had arrived from Phoenix with a more powerful thermal scanner. They were running the device across the debris when the operator paused. Wait. What? He pointed at the screen. That's the shape. Small, low heat, but steady. Eli rushed over, where the operator pointed to a narrow section of concrete about 30 feet below the surface. There, between those two beams. Eli's heart pounded. Dig. They worked with surgical care, saws, chisels, shovels by hand. And then, after 2 long hours, someone yelled, I see fur. Eli dropped everything. He pushed forward, dirt in his eyes, knees bruised from crawling. His hand reached in and touched something warm. A paw. Kaida! A whimper. The sound broke him. He clawed to the last layer of debris with his bare hands until he could see her face, dirty, cut, her eyes barely open, but alive. Hey, girl, he whispered, voice cracking. I got you. She licked his wrist weakly. They lifted her out with ropes and blankets. Her body was limp, her breathing shallow. She hadn't barked because her ribs were bruised, her throat swollen from dust, but she had stayed alive. By instinct, by training, by pure will. And then Eli noticed something. As the medics began to check her vitals, Kaida lifted her head just slightly and looked back at the opening where she'd been trapped. Then she barked. Once. Sharp. Urgent. Eli froze. Wait, no. He dropped to his knees and looked back through the hole. And there, beneath a steel beam Kaida had been lying on, Kaida lay completely still under the warming lamp inside the Flagstaff K-9 Trauma Center. Her body was covered in bandages, for lines stitched gently into her leg, and a small oxygen mask rested over her snout. Her sable fur was matted with dried mud, her eyes swollen from days spent in complete darkness. The only sign of life was a slow, rhythmic rise and fall of her chest. Beside her sat Captain Eli Thompson. He hadn't left in 14 hours. A nurse came by every now and then to check vitals, change her fluids, and whisper words of encouragement to the unconscious K-9. You're the strongest girl I've ever seen, one of them murmured. Just keep fighting. But Eli didn't say much. He just held her paw in his calloused hand and watched the monitor like it was a lifeline. At some point in the early morning, the vet returned with a clipboard. We've run the full tests, Dr. Marquez said. No broken bones. Some soft tissue damage, bruised lungs, dehydration, but she's stable. Just exhausted. Eli let out a long breath. She didn't even whimper when we pulled her out. Dr. Marquez nodded. Her heartbeat remained consistent the whole time. She was saving her energy, conserving oxygen, like she knew she couldn't panic. She didn't panic, Eli said, looking at her. She protected someone instead. The vet gave a small, reverent nod. We don't see that every day. By the next morning, the news had spread like wildfire. K-9 hero survives 6 days buried in rubble, saves lost child. Meet Kaida, the German shepherd who refused to die. Loyalty under pressure, rescue dog found alive, protecting 8-year-old boy. News vans gathered outside the trauma center. Reporters waited with cameras. Online forums and comment sections lit up with photos of Kaida's dirt-covered face, her protective stance, the moment she was lifted from the rubble with the boy behind her. Hashtag Kaida the Hero was trending in all 50 states. But inside the recovery room, there were no headlines, only quiet breathing and the steady beep of survival. Eli had just poured himself a coffee when he got a visitor, a woman in her mid-30s, brown hair in a messy bun, clothes wrinkled and eyes red from crying. Her hands trembled as she approached the room. Eli stood instinctively. You're the boy's mother, she said. I'm Emily. He nodded once. He's stable. The doctors say it's a miracle. She swallowed hard. They told me she was on top of him. Eli looked down at Kaida. The beam would have crushed him, She must have curled herself around him and taken the weight. Emily's voice cracked. How does a dog know to do that? Eli looked at her, eyes dark with exhaustion. Because she doesn't think she's just a dog. She thinks she's responsible. Emily stepped closer to the bed. Can I touch her? He nodded. She reached out gently, fingers brushing over Kaida's ear. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for my son. And Kaida's tail twitched. Once, they both gasped. Eli leaned down. Kaida! Her eyes fluttered. She blinked, slowly but deliberately, then turned her head slightly toward the sound of his voice. Oh my God! Emily breathed. She heard you. Eli couldn't stop the emotion that surged in his throat. That's right. Girl, you're not done yet. Over the next 24 hours, Kaida began to improve. Her breathing normalized, her hydration stabilized, and she even lifted her head on her own. Emily's son, Lucas, had been moved to the pediatric ICU just 2 floors up. Despite his frostbite, bruises, and extreme fatigue, he was expected to make a full recovery. What stunned doctors most was his clarity. She barked at me every time I stopped breathing, he told a nurse. She made me stay awake. And when they asked what he remembered most, Lucas said something that later went viral. She looked like she was hurting, but she still licked my hand. I think she was scared too, but she stayed, because I was more scared. That quote was printed on T-shirts within a week. Back at the station, Captain Eli's crew decided they weren't waiting on bureaucrats to honor Kaida. They started a GoFundMe page for her recovery costs. It hit $80,000 in 48 hours. Flags were flown. Dog treats were delivered from other firehouses. Children sent letters, one of which read, Dear Kaida, you're braver than most humans. Please get better. I love you. But even as Kaida improved, Eli couldn't rest, because something kept nagging at him. Something Lucas said in the hospital. She barked when I stopped breathing. That meant Kaida hadn't just laid on top of him. She had monitored him, adjusted her position, nudged him awake. She had stayed conscious, alert, for over 5 days in near-complete darkness, in freezing temperatures, without food or water. It was more than training. It was instinct, but it was also heart. And Eli couldn't stop thinking about the first day he met her, back when she was only 10 months old. Small, gangly, full of nervous energy. Other trainers had passed on her, said she was too soft, too quiet, not aggressive enough for her AK-9 unit. But Eli had seen something. She didn't bark often, but when she did, it meant something. Now the world had heard her bark, and it had meant everything. 3 days later, Kaida stood for the first time. Wobbly, weak, legs trembling, but standing. Eli was there. You sure you're ready? He asked. It had been nearly 4 weeks since the rescue. Kaida's wounds had healed faster than expected. The swelling around her lungs had gone down. Her ribs no longer needed to be wrapped, and the cracked pads on her paws were toughening back to their old texture. Her gait was still uneven, and her stamina had limits, but her drive, that remained untouched. She had survived. But what came next wasn't survival. It was recovery, and that was proving even harder. Captain Eli Thompson brought her back to Station 47 in early March. The snow was still melting on the sidewalks, the air fresh with the scent of pine and ash. As he parked the truck outside the building she knew so well, Kaida sat upright in the back seat, eyes scanning the familiar brick walls and double garage doors. The bay opened slowly. The crew was waiting. Look who's home, firefighter Cruz said, lowering his voice so it wouldn't startle her. Kaida stepped out of the truck slowly, her leash held loosely in Eli's hand. The station had lined up a modest welcome. Her favorite cot, clean and fluffed, a brand-new stainless steel water bowl engraved with her name, a set of soft toys, and a banner that read, Our hero is home. The moment she walked in, the room fell silent, not out of awkwardness, but out of reverence. Every man and woman in that room had watched her be pulled from the ground, barely breathing, having done something they could barely understand. She had spent 6 days in near-death conditions to protect someone else. She was no longer just Thompson's dog. She was Kaida, And Kaida was legend, but she didn't seem to care about the fanfare. She sniffed a few boots, gave one tail wag, then quietly padded over to her cot, turned in a circle, and lay down with a soft groan, like she'd never left. Eli crouched beside her. Back where you belong, huh? Kaida didn't respond. She just looked at him, but something about her eyes made Eli hesitate. She wasn't all the way back. The first week went fine. Routine helped. Meals at 0700. Light walks. A short daily visit to Dr. Marquez's clinic to monitor her lung capacity. But when it came time to reintroduce training, something shifted. Eli began with simple drills. Sit, stay, find it. Kaida obeyed as always, but she did so without her usual spark. No tail wag, no energy. Then came the real test. Eli brought out the scent box, a controlled environment where objects were hidden for Kaida to locate by smell. It was her specialty. Even when she was green, she'd found target items faster than any dog in the unit. But this time she didn't move. She sat, ears half up, then looked at Eli like she didn't understand what he wanted. Come on, girl, he coaxed gently. It's the same game. Still, she didn't budge. That night, Eli sat in his office, staring at her medical file. All green lights. She was medically cleared. No brain damage. No trauma to olfactory sensors. But something was wrong. He found himself pacing. And then he said out loud what he hadn't admitted since the rescue. She's afraid. 2 days later, Dr. Marquez confirmed it. Eli, she said gently, Kaida went through psychological trauma. Imagine being buried alive for 6 days, unable to move, in total darkness, protecting someone else while your own body deteriorates. She's having a delayed stress response, like a soldier. Eli nodded slowly. So she's broken? Marquez gave him a firm look. She's injured, but not broken, and not forever. But she's not working. She's healing. Eli sighed. She doesn't understand the difference. You do, the vet replied. So give her what she gave that boy time. Patience. Presence. Eli went home that night and sat on the floor beside Kaida's cot, a rawhide in his hand. She looked up, took it, then rested her head against his thigh. That was the moment he decided something had to change. The next morning, Eli called in a favor. He contacted Emily, the mother of the boy Kaida had saved. I need a visit, he said. From Lucas. There was a long pause on the line. Then he asked about her every day. That Saturday, a black SUV pulled up to Station 47. Eli stood outside in his department uniform. Kaida sat beside him, tail still, eyes curious. When the back door opened and Lucas stepped out with a huge grin on his face, Kaida's entire body tensed. She recognized him. Kaida! Lucas shouted, running forward. Eli held up a hand. Gentle, son. She's still recovering. But Kaida was already moving. Her tail thumped. Her ears perked. She stood, slowly, and walked right up to Lucas. He crouched down, hugging her neck. And she licked his face once. Do you remember me? He asked, beaming. She blinked once, then pressed her forehead into his shoulder. Eli's throat tightened. They stayed like that for a long time. Later that afternoon, they let Lucas watch a training drill. Eli hid a cloth in the grass behind the station. Nothing formal, just instinctive work. He looked at Kaida. Find it. For the first time in weeks, her ears lifted fully. She sniffed the air, then stepped forward. She moved slowly at first, as if unsure, but then she caught the scent. And once she had it, she locked in. Within 30 seconds, she had found the cloth and barked once. Lucas clapped. She did it. Kaida turned back, tail wagging, something flickering in her eyes that hadn't been there in a long time. Joy. Eli crouched down. Welcome back, partner. She trotted to him, tail swaying, not just surviving, not just healing, working. That evening, Eli logged a final entry into her incident report. Kaida, K9, SR Flagstaff Unit, status, active, medically cleared, emotionally stable, return to duty on own terms, recommended for commendation at national level, He sat back in his chair, letting the weight of everything settle. And as the sun dipped behind the mountains, casting gold across the station's parking lot, Kaida lay stretched in the doorway, eyes half closed, wind brushing through her fur. She wasn't just back. She was ready for whatever came next. It started as a routine dispatch. A brush fire had flared up along the southern stretch of Route 89, just past a canyon bend where cell service dropped and the forest thickened. It wasn't unusual. This part of Arizona was always flirting with fire season. Most small wildfires were contained in a matter of hours, but this one spread fast. By the time Station 47 was activated and en route, the blaze had already crossed the tree line. Dispatch estimated a 40-acre burn zone. But what made it urgent wasn't just the speed. It was a call that came in from a trapped family. Woman, early 30s. One child, male maybe 5, trapped in a vehicle, heavy smoke, zero visibility. The last words were chilling. The mother is asthmatic. Captain Eli Thompson gripped the steering wheel harder than usual. Beside him, Kaida sat upright, fully suited in her K9 vest. It would be her first real call since the landslide. Eli had debated leaving her behind. She was still healing. Her stamina wasn't what it used to be. But then again, neither was his confidence, until Kaida had proven, again and again, that she was ready. "Let's go to work," he said, and she tapped her paw on the console in reply. By the time they arrived, the forest was a war zone of smoke and flame. Helicopters circled above, dumping water onto roaring canopies. Ground crews shouted over crackle of burning branches. Visibility was down to a few yards in some areas. The heat radiated in waves that shimmered through the trees. The mother's vehicle had been located via drone, about 300 yards off-road, down a steep incline. But the path was narrow, unstable, and filled with thick brush. "Too tight for trucks," a firefighter said. "We'll lose time hacking through it." Eli turned to Kaida. She was already alert, eyes locked on the smoke line, nose twitching. "You think you can find them?" he asked. She barked once. "Let's go." He clipped her harness. She led. They moved fast, dodging fallen branches, ducking under blackened limbs. Eli called in their position as they ran, his radio crackling with static and frantic updates. Flames shifting northeast. Wind change incoming. 10 minutes max. Then, flashover likely in 5. They had to be out before that. Kaida suddenly stopped. She crouched low, nose against the ground, then veered left through a gap in the trees. That's when Eli saw it, a silver SUV half buried in ash and brush. The windows were dark, the driver's door cracked open. Kaida sprinted toward it. Eli followed, his boots sinking into hot mud. He reached the car and pulled the door wider. Inside was a woman, barely conscious, slumped across the steering wheel. Her lips were blue. A small boy was in the back seat, sobbing quietly, rocking back and forth. Kaida immediately jumped into the back, placing herself beside the child, licking his cheek to ground him. "Hey!" Eli yelled into his radio. "We've got them. 1 adult, 1 child. Adult is non-responsive. Smoke inhalation. We need evac now." The reply was broken but clear. "On our way. 2 minutes." Eli opened the back door, pulling the boy into his arms. The woman stirred. He turned. "Ma'am, can you move?" She blinked. "Where?" "You're safe. But we need to go now." She coughed hard. "Blood. Not good." Kaida barked again, loud, sharp. Then she ran ahead. And seconds later, she barked again from a different angle. Eli frowned. "Double signal?" he whispered. Kaida ran back, looked at Eli, then turned toward the opposite side of the SUV. Eli's skin went cold. "Wait!" "There's someone else." He circled the car and saw what Kaida had found. A second figure, behind the trunk, buried under a collapsed pine branch. A teen, maybe 17, unconscious, breathing shallow. No time. Eli radioed again. "We have a third. Repeat, 3 victims. Teen male unconscious. Conditions worsening. Dispatch. Flashover in 2. Move." He grabbed the teen by the arms and hauled him over his shoulder. Then Kaida did something that broke protocol, but saved lives. She ran ahead, not back the way they came, but left through a smaller path. Eli wanted to shout after her, but something in his gut told him, trust her. He followed, and 30 seconds later, they burst out onto a gravel access road. A fire engine screeched to a halt. Medics ran forward, loading the victims into the truck. Kaida stopped only when the child was safe. She sat in the dirt, panting hard. Smoke blackened her fur. Her eyes were rimmed in soot. Her paws bled from running across hot embers. But she didn't whine. She watched every person be lifted to safety. Eli knelt beside her, coughed, and placed a hand on her chest. You just saved 3 more lives. Kaida leaned her head into his arm, eyes half closing. This time, it wasn't exhaustion. It was contentment. That night, the station didn't sleep. Word of the rescue hit the local news by 10 p.m. Same K-9 who survived landslide now saves family from fire. Kaida strikes again. Fire can't stop this dog's instinct. Arizona's 4-legged hero returns to duty and stuns everyone. But none of it mattered to Eli. He was back in the firehouse, sitting beside Kaida as the vet cleaned her wounds. She'll need another week, the doctor said. Burns aren't deep, but she pushed herself hard. Eli stroked her ears. She's always been like that. The next morning, the state ceremony was set for April 14th. An auditorium was booked at the Arizona Firefighter Memorial Center. Invitations were sent out to fire chiefs, city officials, news outlets, and every K-9 handler within 500 miles. Local politicians prepped speeches. A marching band was scheduled to open the event. And at the center of the agenda, printed in bold on the glossy program, honoring K-9 Kaida for unmatched valor in the line of duty. Eli had mixed feelings. He stood in front of the mirror that morning adjusting his dress uniform, tied tight around his neck. Behind him, Kaida lay quietly, already wearing her custom service vest, freshly washed and stitched with one new patch. Survivor plus protector. She doesn't need a medal, Eli muttered, watching her through the mirror. Kaida tilted her head. He sighed. Okay, maybe we do. They arrived early, walking past rows of chairs, many already filled with pressed firefighters, and children waving little flags with paw prints on them. Kaida walked proudly beside Eli, her stride confident, tail swaying, not out of excitement but alertness. She was working. Every head turned as they entered. Applause rippled through the room. Kaida stopped once, glancing toward a row of children in the front. One of them had Down syndrome and held a hand-drawn poster. K-9 Kaida is my hero. She stepped toward him, calmly and gently, and let the boy hug her neck. The crowd melted. Eli kept his eyes dry by force. They took their seats near the stage. Lucas and his mother arrived moments later, sitting 2 rows behind. Emily leaned forward, touched Eli's shoulder, and whispered, "He hasn't stopped talking about her since the fire." Lucas waved with a grin. "Hi, Kaida." Kaida's ears twitched. Eli whispered back, "He's the reason we're here." The ceremony began with the usual fanfare. The national anthem, speeches from officials, a slideshow of local heroes. But then the lights dimmed and a giant photo filled the screen. Kaida, covered in dust, eyes bright, paw curled protectively around Lucas's wrist. The silence was broken only by a single collective breath. Then the narrator's voice. She was buried. She did not move. She did not break. She did not flee. She protected. And when the time came again, she ran back into fire not because she was told, but because she chose to. That's when Eli knew he had to go up and speak. Not because it was scheduled, but because no one else could say what needed to be said. He walked up to the podium, Kaida beside him. The spotlight hit them both. He cleared his throat. Kaida is not just my K-9 partner. She's not just a member of Station 47. She's not just a rescue dog. She is, without question, one of the finest firefighters I've ever served with. The crowd clapped. She doesn't ask for praise. She doesn't understand headlines. She only understands one thing. Someone needs help. And she goes. He looked down at her. I've been in this service 20 years. I've seen men hesitate. I've hesitated. She never has. Silence. And maybe that's why we look to dogs like her, not because they make us feel safer, but because they remind us who we could be. He looked up. So today, we don't give Kaida a medal because she's a dog. We give her one because she's earned it. The crowd rose to their feet. Applause thundered. Kaida didn't react. She stood still, calm, ears forward, doing her job. The governor stepped up with a velvet box. Inside was a custom medal, thick silver, engraved with her name and a symbol of fire crossed by a paw print. But when he went to place it over her neck, Kaida stepped back, just slightly, but noticeably. Eli touched the governor's hand gently. It's okay. He took the medal and handed it to Kaida instead, placing it between her front paws on the floor. She looked down at it, then looked up at Eli, and laid her head across it. The audience gasped. It wasn't submission. It was understanding. She accepted the honor, but on her own terms. The photos from that moment went viral again. Kaida, with her head on the medal, Eli kneeling beside her, Lucas and Emily watching from the front row. But none of them knew that just days later, everything would change. The warning came in the form of a phone call. Eli was making breakfast when the station phone rang, only used for urgent alerts from dispatch. He picked it up. This is Captain Thompson. The voice on the other end was tight. There's been an accident on the I-40. Major pileup. Multiple casualties. Fire spreading fast. There's a child trapped inside a turned-over school bus. Eli's hand clenched around the phone. Copy. We're on the way. Kaida stood instantly, her harness already by the door. She had heard the tone. She knew. Eli bent down, hands trembling slightly. You sure you're ready for this? Kaida looked at him, silent, focused. He clipped her harness, and they ran. The highway was chaos. Twisted steel, black smoke, sirens in every direction. The bus was on its side, wheels spinning slowly, fire licking the rear axle. Screams came from inside. Flames were moving toward the front cabin, where a 6-year-old girl was pinned between seats. Kaida sprinted ahead. Eli screamed, "Wait!" But she didn't stop. She slid under the open emergency hatch, crawled through the smoke, and disappeared into the hospital room was dim, lit only by a soft lamp and the steady rhythm of Kaida's heartbeat on the monitor. Her breathing was shallow, slower now. Tubes ran from her foreleg to a bag of fluids. Her eyes fluttered every few minutes, as if dreaming of running. Eli hadn't left her side in 36 hours. The doctors had done everything. Oxygen therapy, IVs, anti-inflammatories. But Kaida's body had reached its limit. The combination of heat damage, oxygen deprivation, and previous trauma from the landslide had finally overwhelmed her system. They had saved the child. But the price was being paid now. Eli sat in silence, fingers stroking the edge of the service medal still resting on Kaida's pillow. Her head lay beside it, unmoving. He had called the crew, called Lucas and his mother, called the little girl's parents. And now he just sat, waiting, remembering. He thought about the first time he saw her stumble through the K-9 Academy gates. Too skinny, ears floppy, eyes so full of uncertainty that the other trainers wrote her off in minutes. He remembered the moment she passed her first search test, her first real rescue, her first field mission. He remembered her standing at his side in the smoke and in the silence, never afraid, never failing. He remembered what it felt like when she barked from under the rubble, and again from inside the school bus. She had never once backed down, even when she should have, even when no one would have blamed her. Kaida had made a decision 100 times over. If someone needed saving, she would go. Eli rose slowly, went to window, and looked out into the quiet Arizona night. The sky was full of stars. Then behind him, he heard something, a soft sound, a tail, thump. He turned. Kaida had opened her eyes, and she was wagging her tail once weakly. She looked at him, and in that gaze, he saw everything she couldn't say. I did it. I kept them safe. I did what I came to do. Eli knelt beside her, voice cracking. You did more than anyone ever could." She blinked slowly. He lowered his forehead to hers. "I love you, girl." Then her eyes closed, and her chest rose one last time, then fell, and did not rise again. The monitor beeped once, then went silent. There was no ceremony the next day. No cameras, no press, just Eli and his crew carrying Kaida's body, wrapped in the American flag and her service vest, out of the trauma center and into the back of Engine 47, lights flashing only in tribute. They drove her through town one last time, and the streets were lined with people. Children held signs. Firefighters stood at salute. Shop owners wept openly. Drivers pulled over and stepped out of their cars. She had become more than a dog. She was a symbol of loyalty, courage, and sacrifice. At the firehouse, they laid her in the courtyard beneath the flagpole. Eli stood before her, holding her service medal. He didn't pin it to her vest. He placed it gently between her paws, then stepped back and said quietly, "Kaida, K9SR, Flagstaff Unit, you're dismissed." The wind stirred the trees, and for a moment there was nothing but peace. They buried her in the station's memorial garden, beneath a plaque that read, K9 Kaida. Buried, burned, battered, never broken. Saved dozens. Protected always. Gone, but never forgotten. Beside the plaque, they planted a tree, an aspen, because even in fire-ravaged soil, aspens grow back. Stronger. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived for Eli. It was from a National Fire and Rescue K9 Federation. Inside was a simple line. "We are creating the Kaida Award for exceptional bravery by a rescue animal. She will be the first to receive it, and never the last." Eli placed the letter beside her photo on the wall. Life returned to routine in the months that followed. Calls came in. Fires flared. Floods threatened. Lives had to be saved. But something was different. Eli had begun training again. Only now, he was working with new recruits, new dogs, and every time he walked them through the course, he'd stop at one particular wall, the one with all the names of those who served and gave everything. And there she was, at the top. Kaida, he'd tell the story. He always told it the same way. She was left for dead under a collapsed building, and saved a child, then came back, ran into a wildfire, and saved 3 more. She never barked unless it mattered, and when it mattered most, she was louder than anyone. Sometimes the new handlers would cry. Sometimes they'd just stare. But always they listened, and they learned, because Kaida had left more than a legacy. She left a standard. One day, while Eli was sweeping the front steps of the station, he heard a boy's voice behind him. "Excuse me." He turned. It was Lucas, a little taller now, holding something wrapped in fabric. "I made this in class," the boy said. "We had to make something for someone we miss." He unwrapped it. It was a clay figure, small, crude, but unmistakably a dog, and in its paws the tiny silver disc. "She still has her medal," Lucas said proudly. Eli felt the tears rise. He crouched down, took the statue carefully, and said, "She'd love it." "You think she knew how much we loved her?" the boy asked. Eli nodded. "Every day." Lucas looked up. "Good, because I still talk to her. Every night." Eli swallowed. "Me too." And together, they placed a statue beneath the aspen tree, right beside her plaque, where the wind whispered through the leaves, and the silence was full of presence. If this story moved you, remember, some heroes don't wear uniforms. They wear fur. They don't ask for recognition. They just act, quietly, instinctively, with a loyalty we could only hope to match. Subscribe to the channel if Kaida's story reminded you of the bond between